There's like the scars that everyone has. So that seems like something that they have done to themselves. All the men seem to have shaved their heads. The women all have the same type of braids. Like it does seem like culty, religious-y. What I thought was kind of weird was that, in the recap, Abby said that they were in a militia for 5 years and were taught never to kill people that can't defend themselves. And that to me doesn't jive with what we saw happen to this group, the Seraphites.
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Sterling and I are talking about the hit Max TV series, The Last of Us, Season 2, Episode 3, The Path. So spoilers are ahead. And if you like the video, a thumbs up would be appreciated. And if you want to stay up to date with all of the content that we drop, just hit that subscribe button and turn on that bell for notifications. And with that, Sterling, let's talk about Jackson, the city, all the characters there. I really liked that we did kind of a time jump so that we aren't really dealing with the exact aftermath of what's going on. What are your thoughts?
Man, everybody's grappling with the ramifications. And I like that also showed up in the intro. Did you notice that there was only the one person-like figure in the intro when normally there's two?
I totally missed it. This time I was just not paying attention during the intro, but now I have to go back and watch it. And I'm sure it's probably going to be that way moving forward.
I think this is the perfect time to kind of pick up to deal with Ellie grappling with these kind of ramifications. And I think that this show is, for me, really well written because Dawn and I are also watching Handmaid's Tale, which we actually do enjoy. I just don't think it's great quite like this. And I sometimes feel like the characters will do things that won't make sense. And it is because there's a plot point that they want to have happen. And so they'll write things to get to that plot point versus this feels like the characters are doing what they would do and not always what you want them to do, or because it's compelling. I think the argument in kind of like the town hall meeting of the different sides, seeing that there's only like 3 votes, I think, for Ellie's choice, even though she does make kind of a reasoned argument. And then who ends up standing up for her is kind of a big surprise, but it makes sense. And it seems like what these characters would do versus just, I want to get this plot point done.
Right. I mean, and I empathize with the town people. Like, what they say, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And so, yes, there was this targeted attack. And does it make sense to send out, 16 of the best people that you're risking that are potential people that can help rebuild the town, help, keep the town safe? Just like they were mentioning with the wall. The fact that sending people out halfway across the country just to go after one person, that, it does feel very much like revenge. And, I think that when you put it in a revenge outlook, it's not a betterment to the survivors. And so I did think that, Ellie's speech about how it's more of justice. And I do agree that if you don't do something about this, there is the potential of them coming back and hurting more people. Or, we see later that there's tanks. They could roll these tanks in and destroy this town. They know where the town is. So I think both sides are reasonable of going and not going.
Yeah. And I can definitely see, what I guess most of the people kind of felt with, where it's like, even if Joel was a central figure in the community, he was one person and they lost plenty of other people, so to focus so much on just him doesn't quite make sense when I'm sure that they still need to protect the people here. So sending 16 of their best, does that really make sense? But then another part of it is like the argument of, should we send people out so that we don't look weak, so that people don't keep doing this to us? I would get that argument if the attack had been different, if it had been more of like an attack on Jackson. But it does seem like it was an attack on just Joel. They let Ellie live. They let Dina live. Like it very much seems like it was targeted on one person. And considering everything that this town has lost, they need all their resources to rebuild and to take care of the people that are hurt and, everything like that. And so I don't think it would make sense to take on this mission. Now, knowing what we kind of saw as far as like the tanks and like what these people might be willing to do, yes, but they don't, like, the town doesn't have that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, like, I think it was revenge all along. I think Ellie tried to dress it up nicely because she got a very smart message from Jesse about nobody's going to vote yes on anger.
Right.
Which I think was very smart. And once again, like, speaking of writing and being kind of like well written, I love that speech that Ellie gave because that seemed like something that a young person that maybe doesn't have a huge formal education might write. Like it sounded like amateurish writing and like bad reading of that writing. It sounded like the kind of stilted reading of an essay you would find in maybe like grade school.
Yeah. I know Bella Ramsey is getting a lot of hate for her casting as Ellie, where she might not look quite like the original Ellie, but her performance, I feel, outshines her looks. Like, she, to me, playing the first game, captures the essence of Ellie really well, and I think that's a hard character to play. Like, there's a lot of like fire to her. She's very excitable and very like ready to just do something she needs to get done. And I think that she is performing it very well. And I think that reading of that letter was a great example. Like, that was a phenomenal performance of, I'm reading something and I'm also like trying to be calm and get this message across. And I thought it was a very well played scene. I thought she did a great job, and I think she's doing a great job as Ellie.
Yeah, I've heard similar things, as far as like the casting goes. And I think that to me, that doesn't quite make sense because I think that there's a lot of nuance to this role. And so I think there's plenty of people that could maybe play the surface level of it, of, that she's a very tough person, that she doesn't always like listen to what she's told. She acts out. Like, I think that surface level would be very easy to do. And I think if you don't have like the subtleties that kind of explain why she acts out like that, I think it would be very one note and not very believable. But I think that like when she really needs to show that kind of depth to that character, because Ellie is so much more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
That is very much like her outward facing persona, but that's not the entire person. I think it's great casting, and I think the show is so much stronger for it. I do think that like having Joel die so quickly in the season and then spending so much time on trying to get the town to, to say yes to this plan before they go out, that did slow things down. But I actually really enjoyed that. I think like it came off as very believable once again for like how things would go. It gave us time to process our emotions for what happened. And I don't think that that's something that you would normally get to do in the video game. I think it's very action oriented. And I'm sure that like after his death, I'm sure you have to like jump right into the next, action based sequence. And so I think this feels a little bit more true to kind of the media format that we're in.
Yeah, I think, again, I haven't played this game. I know from the first game, there are really like transitional periods from like intense moments. So Joel may have died, and then it would be like, you would then see Ellie, she would wake up, it would cut to like probably the 3 months later, she would be like advocating to go after these people. And then the game would have picked up right where her and Dina leave, somewhere around there. That's what I'm assuming. One thing I found out about the game that is different from this season of the show, and from what I hear, the feeling that it invokes creates this more powerful hatred. So in the game, Abby kills Joel, and we don't know the motive behind it. We don't know that Joel killed her father. Like, we find that out later. So when it first happens in the game, it's this very abrupt moment that seems really unfair. It seems like it shouldn't have happened. It doesn't make sense. And it like kind of really creates the motive for Ellie to want to go seek revenge. Where in this one, we know right up front that he killed her dad. And so that, you know, it does kind of create a little bit of empathy for Abby's character early on, even though we've seen them do heinous things, especially now with what happened to the Seraphites. But we'll get to that as well.
Yeah, and I do actually have kind of some questions around that, but we'll get to that when we kind of get to that. So I really like that we kind of got to see the characters grappling with it. I thought it was nice to see Joel's brother, you know, talking with the therapist, you know, and kind of seeing how everybody grapples with it. And it was nice to see, I think, Ellie and Dina's relationship get a little bit more fleshed out, because it definitely seemed, I don't know, just kind of like flirty fun in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like, the decision that they're making of going out on this together, but alone, like without anybody else, that is pretty huge. Like, that's not just flirty fun.
Right. I mean, there was a little bit of foreshadowing in the first episode of them going into that supermarket or whatever to dispose of the clickers. I feel like that was the foreshadow of them leaving in this episode. So I thought that was very nice touch from, you know, the writers and the creators. But yeah, I mean, I think it really shows the strength of their friendship. And, you know, with Dina holding out the information about knowing about the people, where they're going, and waiting to tell Ellie before she was ready, you know, that whole scene with the cookies, I think it's really built what their real friendship is. Like, I think, you know, they kind of alluded to it when Joel's asking Dina why Ellie's mad at her or him. And it implies that they're close, but we didn't really see it. But now seeing that, like, Dina knows that Ellie's going to leave, and instead of like being like, hey, don't go, she actually helps Ellie prepare better for the trip. And I think that we really did get to see how close of friends they are.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing that, like, Dina has some real experience. You know, I think she's been doing these missions for a while for the town. And so I think that she is better prepared as far as like readiness, versus I think Ellie might be able to like survive in tough environments. She's a badass. She deals with whatever, you know, crappy situation, but she's never had the luxury to be able to prepare
right
for what they went through.
Right. I did like that we saw a little bit of their journey, you know, just kind of like cute flirty moment, just to kind of continually grow them as characters and their dynamic together. But I'm also kind of glad that we didn't have to, like, the whole season wasn't, we're trying to get to Washington. Like in the first season, the whole point was to get to Salt Lake, and the whole season was them getting there. So I'm very glad that we're not taking the whole season to get to Abby, and that we're actually there in Washington.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I was surprised by like what we found there, and I was surprised by like what they found along the way. Because this new group is really interesting to me. You know, when we first see them, there's like the scars that everyone has. So that seems like something that they have done to themselves.
Yeah.
all the men seem to have shaved their heads. The women all have the same type of braids. So, like, it does seem like culty, religious-y.
Yeah, it does also seem like they abducted that young little girl. Like, that wasn't her dad, and that they're trying to get her away from her home. So, a very similar dynamic to Joel and Ellie of a non-father taking basically adopting a young girl to go on a journey. And I think, at least for me, seeing what the wolves have done to them and how they killed them and how they killed a similar Joel and Ellie-like person, I think that also creates more support for Ellie going through with this mission. Like, we see that they are capable of killing what seems like innocent people. I mean, who knows about this religious cult? They could have their own nefarious ideas and plots, and they might be terrible and needed to be taken care of. But from our perspective and Ellie's perspective, it does seem like justification for her going out and getting rid of Abby.
Right. I didn't get what you said about the girl being taken by them. And that's interesting. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I believe it was something along the lines of she was scared.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like the hammer, and it seemed like he was trying to console her with faith. And then she was saying like, I'm getting farther from home. And it didn't seem like they shared a home, but he has told her. So that's how I took it, at least.
Interesting. What I thought was kind of weird was that, in the recap we saw, and I wouldn't have remembered this without the recap, that Abby said that they were in a militia for 5 years and were taught never to kill people that can't defend themselves.
Mm.
And that to me doesn't quite jive with what we saw happen to this group, the Seraphites.
Yeah, I mean, that first guy was clearly shot in the back. Doesn't look like he's defending himself.
The young kid, like what kind of threat is the kid?
Unless the justification is she had a hammer by the end of it. But also that logic doesn't quite add up with Joel either, because they basically caught Joel, they disarmed him, and he wasn't allowed to defend himself. Like, well,
I think she said that she was going to make an exception for him.
Oh, right. That's right.
Because of like how terrible he was,
Right. Okay, that makes more sense.
So I'm very curious about this dynamic with like whether or not maybe Abby doesn't have the whole picture of what the wolves are doing. I'm curious about the dynamic with the wolves and the Seraphites, because like you kind of implied, it does seem like they've got some history. Like, could there be a good reason that the wolves did what they did? I want to see more about this kind of world.
Yeah, like we've heard a little bit about Fedra that was in the previous season, and it is cool to see how I would expect a post-apocalyptic thing to go, is that there would be groups, like the wolves, Fedra, the Seraphites, Jackson. Like, it is cool to see that it is building out a world that is not directly at this moment relating to the main characters and what they're going through. Like, the whole Seraphites are completely new and added for, probably a good reason. We'll see. And I like that the world is being built out in that way.
Yeah. I absolutely love the visuals getting up to Washington. Like, that is absolutely stunning. And then it is wild how big of a militia it looks like Wolf is.
Yeah. And how scary that our protagonists are feeling like that there's not a huge group because they were so easily able to walk into Seattle. So I think that when we heard that they were about to take out these wolves, we feel like, okay, it's going to be like that crew, maybe like a handful of other people, they can take that. And then seeing tanks and like an army of hundreds of people, this doesn't look like it will be as easy as we thought it would be.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even know how they get out of this or where they go.
Yeah, and it's not even the midpoint. It's really exciting what has been built up already. You know, I could have seen this be like the season buildup.
Right.
That we finally got to. So it feels like there's much more that they've got.
Yeah, we're already to Seattle with our two main characters. We're going to deal with Abby and no traveling. And I do feel like with Tommy and the therapist and, you know, Tommy's wife, Jesse, the guy that helped them leave, I do feel like there is a lot of story that could still be told with them. And like, it seems like they are still going to be main characters in this going forward. Now, I don't know if it's going to be like, we'll cut to Jackson to see what they're dealing with, even though it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of loose threads over there. So it could be completely over with them. But I do feel like them as characters, there could be a lot more. And so there could be potential that we come back after succeeding. And what does that mean? Or maybe after they do what they do, they're trying to get back as soon as they can. And I don't know where you go from here.
I'm excited.
Me too. But with that, our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along. Come back next week as we do Last of Us Season 2, Episode 4. Until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.